This is March 9th, 2010 at 3:50, and June and Ken Hunter are interviewing Morton Miller, who served in the United States Army from October 10th, 1942 until December 15th, 1945. Tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in the Bronx, New York on February 20th, 1922.
What did you do before you went into the Army?
Well, I joined the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1940 in Fort Dix. And I was sent to Lake Ontario by Syracuse. From there, there was an opening at the Schenectady General Depot in Schenectady, New York. I applied for the transfer and I received it, and I was transferred to this unit in Schenectady, which also had a senior unit, and the senior unit were World War I veterans. And from there, I was drafted into the Army.
Okay, now where did you go for your basic training?
Basic training, I was supposedly, they told me I was one of the fortunate ones, because I ended up at Camp Cross, South Carolina, which is entitled the Country Club of the United States Army.
And what was the basic training like when you got there?
Well, the basic training wasn't hard for me because I was a Boy Scout, and I had done a lot of camping, a lot of hiking, and so on. So it came a little easy for me. It wasn't difficult.
What were some of the kind of things you did in basic training?
Well, in our platoon, we had a runner, Lieutenant, I can't think of his name now, but every morning before we went to breakfast, we had to run 3 miles, which we didn't like, but we had to do it, and we did it. And basic training wasn't bad. I didn't mind it at all because it wasn't as difficult for me as it might have been for somebody else. I was used to the outdoors and etc. from my scouting experience.
Now, do you remember when in the basic training there, you were being equipped with uniforms and getting a haircut and shots at a medical exam? Do you remember those experiences?
Oh yeah, I remember when we got the shots. We walked through the infirmary and they were shooting us both arms. I don't even remember what they were shooting us for, but they were shooting us for lots. In basic training, the thing I remember as they were teaching us how you could see light for 3 miles away on a night problem, and we were amazed that you could see that. We didn't realize that before. The other thing was we had to dig a foxhole with a bayonet, and I broke 2 of them trying to dig in the clay of South Carolina. South Carolina is noted for its red clay, but it wasn't bad. I didn't have too bad of a time myself.
What kind of barracks, or did you sleep outdoors in tents?
No, we slept in barracks. We had, I can picture in my mind, they were just regular Army barracks, and we slept in there, and of course each barrack had I think they had a sergeant and a corporal maybe who ran the barracks. And they blow the whistle, and if you didn't get up when they came around, they dumped you, meaning they dumped your cot right over, and that woke you up. It was a good. We had a barrack sergeant. He was a big Hoosier from Indiana, and boy, he didn't play games with nobody. You wasn't up, and over you went, and that was the end of it.
What about meals in the Army? What were they like?
Our food was excellent. I have no complaints with our food. In basic training was excellent. All you wanted, and the food was good. I have no problem with that.
What was a typical day like in basic training? What time did you get up? What time was you go to bed at night? What kind of things were you required to do during the day?
God, you're going back 70 years now. Well, of course, they blew reveille. You get up, And this lieutenant that we had in basic was a runner, and we had to run 3 miles before we'd go in for breakfast. And then, of course, we had the field trips during the day. Then they were teaching us nomenclature on the rifles and the pistols and the different weapons that we were going to handle, like the 60 millimeter mortar, the 30 caliber light machine gun. We didn't have any heavy 30 machine guns because the companies that were at that time used only the light 30 machine gun and the 60 millimeter mortar. And we were formed like a regular company unit. We had 3 rifle platoons and 1 weapons platoon. And the weapons platoon consisted of 2 light 30 caliber machine guns and 3 60 millimeter mortars. I remember that. And we were broken down like that. And every day, of course, they had a regular schedule. We never finished, well, let me put it this way. My unit, the group that I was in, training battalion, we never finished our basic training. We were in our, I don't know, let me see. We might have been in, let's see, 4, 8, 12. We might have been in our 12th to 13th week of basic. And I found out later when I got out that my basic training unit was already slated to fill in the 32nd Division, because at that time they were fighting in Boona and Gona in New Guinea, and we were to replace the casualties that they incurred, and they walked over the Owen Stanley Mountains. And we were slated, this group that I was slated to replace as replacements for the 32nd when we brought them back. So we had all kinds of training, night training especially. They showed us how you could see a light like 3 miles away at night. It was an interesting thing to see these things. And then, of course, we had to go out on a firing squad, on a firing line. We had 03 rifles at that time. We didn't get any M1s until we got to Australia. But here, we were in Camp Cross, South Carolina, is where I took my basic, and that was known as the Country Club of the United States Army at that time.
So then, was your first assignment, what was your assignment after basic training?
After
Where did
basic,
you go?
well, what I found out later after I got out, that training cycle was already slated as replacement for the 32nd
Right.
Division, which was fighting in New Guinea at Boona, Gona, and San Ananda. We were already slated to go there.
So
I found that out later after
yeah.
the war.
So was that your next assignment?
Yes.
Did you fly
yeah.
or
They
go, or
they
how
cut
did you
us
get
off. There was 150 of us from New York assigned to this group, and we were planning on coming home for Christmas in 1942, and we were going to hire a plane to fly back to Schenectady. But they froze us. They put us on alert. When they do that, they put you on alert that nobody is out. We didn't know that we were slated to fill in the 32nd Division casualties that they were enduring at that time. So when they alerted us, they canceled all the leaves and everything and put us on trains, Pullman trains, and of course, rumors were rift. We're going here, we're going there, we're going to Europe, we're going to Alaska. We never figured on going to the Pacific. But anyway, we ended up at, after 10 days in the trains going up and down the country, we ended up in Camp Stoneman, California. And that's when we found out that we're going to the Pacific. We wanted to go to Europe, but that's the way the cookie crumbles.
How did you feel at that moment when you found that out? Do you remember?
How does a 19, 20-year-old feel? You know, in 1942, I was 20 years old. So, you know, just it turned out that I was the average age of any GI. And how do you think you feel when?
Were you scared
Well-
or happy?
Well, of
or-
course, you know, you're always apprehensive that, you know, you're going to be invincible. We were like anybody else. You know, we got to Camp Stoneman. Of course, we got to Stoneman. We had no idea that that was the embarkation point for the Pacific. And so we got to Stoneman, and the next thing we know, they put us aboard the USS General Frederick Funston. It was an Army transporter, AKA. I think they called it an AKA.
Yes, that's
And
right.
there was like 5,000 of us. But we had there was 5 of us from Schenectady that were drafted, were friends. There was Bob Mott from Duanesburg, and there was Bill Seifer, he was out of New Hampshire. Then there was Al Quinlan from Albany, and there was Bob Van Franken from Waterville, and then it was me from Schenectady, and we kind of hung together. And going over, we had an interesting experience. We had a guy, I won't mention his name, wouldn't shower, a wouldn't wash, and he stunk to high heaven. So we warned him, you know, either you get cleaned up or we'll take care of it. Well, anyway, he didn't, so we said to the compartment sergeant, assign him and us to the head. And
The head, for people that don't
the
know,
head
is the bathroom.
is the bathroom. That's the head is the bathroom. So he did, and we drew brand new scrub brushes and GI soap. And we got Plas, oh, that was his name anyway. We got him in there, and we went over him. When he came out, he was pink and clean. We never had a problem after that.
They
That
call
was
it the
just
old
a-
Kai brush.
Yeah, we gave him a GI bath with the brand new brushes. It was a lot of fun anyway, but maybe not to him. But we landed in. There was 5,000 replacements on board this ship, and the 5 of us would not sleep down below because they had the hammocks, like 5 tiers of hammocks. We decided we're going to sleep above decks, so we took our shelter halves, which makes a pup tent, and the 5 of us slept upstairs up on the deck, all the way across. We ended up, of course, I think we were shellbacks when we left California, but we were pollywogs when we got to Australia, meaning when you cross the
Equator.
the equator, you go from a shellback to a pollywog. So we had quite a. And then the other thing interesting was when you go over, you lose a day. Like you go Wednesday and then you go Friday. There's no Thursday. Of course, coming back is the reverse. You get 2 days of the same. 2 days of the week is the same. Then we got to Australia. We were sent to Ascot Park. It was actually a racetrack, Ascot racetrack, and we were milling around, and then they got us all lined up, and they were calling names and units. What we didn't know is that our group was slated as replacements in the 32nd Division for the casualties they sustained at Boona, Gona, and San Fernando. Of course, the original 32nd, they walked over the Owen Stanley mountain ranges, and they suffered tremendous casualties. So we were already slated. In fact, in our basic training, our cycle was slated to fill in the 32nd, which we found out later. And they called us out, and at that time, I was assigned to Company E of the 126th Infantry Regiment, which was the 32nd. And we trained there for, I remember, maybe 6-8 months. And then they sent us down south. That was in Brisbane. Then they sent us down south to New South Wales. And we're landing using the beaches down there were similar, to, I guess, to what we were supposed to do. And they were practicing landings, infantry landings. And we were there, we was in Australia for 9 months, and we enjoyed it. We liked it. I liked it. I liked it in particular. In fact, one night, Hal Quinlan and I got a pass for the weekend after basic, and Camp Cable. Well, Camp Cable was the Army camp, and it was named after this first guy that was killed from the 32nd. And we met this rancher, and we got talking with him, and he invited us to his house, or his, they didn't call them ranches at that time, they called them stations, and they raised mutton and sheep, sheep. So Hal and I both went with him. We went to his station. We stayed overnight Saturday night, and we asked him, how much land do you own? And he took us out Sunday morning, and he said, took us on this knoll. He said, now you turn 360 degrees, as far as you can see is ours, it's mine. Which is, we were very impressed with it. It's quite, the people in Australia were very, very cordial, very nice. We had no trouble. Of course, we had trouble with their money. Of course, they had the florins, the shillings, and the pounds. Like a 1 pound note, now, this is going back 1942. A 1 pound note at that time was worth $3.28. A 5 pound note was $15 and change, and a 10 pound note was $30. Well, us GIs, not familiar with it, we were treating like a $1 bill, a $5 bill, and a $10 bill. But the people were very good. They didn't cheat us either. They you put your hand out and say, okay, take what you're talking about. Of course, they had the pence, the shilling, and the florin. The florin was 2 shillings, would be like a 50-cent piece. The shilling would be like a quarter, and the pence would be like a dime. And then he had the penny. They had big copper pennies. But the people were very nice. They were very cordial, very helpful. Of course, most of their men were in the Middle East. They were fighting Rommel in the Middle East. But they were very nice. They were very cordial, very nice, and very cooperative. And then, of course, from there we went to Goodenough Island. I was assigned to Company E, the 126th Infantry Regiment, the 32nd Division. And we all got split up, the 5 of us. The other, Hal Quinlan, he got stationed right in Brisbane, and the other guys got into the other regiments of 127 and 128. The 3 regiments comprised the 32nd Division, and of course its units. So we got separated, and well, from there we went to Goodenough, and we sat there for 6 weeks to get us acclimated to the area. And then from there, of course, we were supposed to make the initial landing at Gloucester, but for some reason they changed it, gave it to the Marines. The Marines made the landing and took a terrible beating and casualties. And then we got redirected, and then we made our landing in Sador. And when we made the landing, the Japs there was 100,000 Japs stationed at Madang and Wewak, which is above us. If they came down through the jungle, they could be down there in 24 hours, or if they come down by ship, they could be down there like it was in less than 24 hours. They come down, but they didn't come down. We made the initial landing, and our job was to capture the airstrip there in Sador. So, but that's the way it went.
In that experience over there, did you have any opportunity to talk with people that were under the Japanese influence then, when they took over the places? Did you have any contact with Japanese prisoners?
No, I had no contact with Japanese prisoners, and I wasn't able to talk to anybody that had. Of course, in New Guinea, we just had the natives, and without the natives, we would never made the progress that we made, because I mean, they knew the country, they knew the trail. You get in the jungle down there, you get lost.
They were your guides.
They were the guides, and they carried our supplies and so on. And without their help, I don't think we could have taken New Guinea.
Very trustworthy people.
Yeah, they had their. That was when I first encountered them, with purple hair and orange hair. red hair. It was kind of hard to see it, but and kept the distance. We kept our distance, you know. But they were very good. Without the help, I don't think we could have made it. But that's only my opinion.
While you were in this operation here, what was the food like? Did you have time for recreation? Or
When we got in there, we had the old sea rations initially. And I don't remember when it happened, but then they came out with what they call 10 and 1. 10 and 1. It was a big box, feed 10 men one day. And that had everything in it that you needed. It was from toilet paper to cigarettes, just about everything you needed. But the sea rations, I liked the sea rations. I thought they were good.
What was in a typical sea ration?
Well, you had like beans and hot dogs, hash, vegetables, stuff like that. It was. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it.
We've heard from other servicemen that to be able to cook their meals at times, they'd have to cook in their helmets. They'd wash in their helmets. Did
Yes.
you experience that kind of thing?
Oh, I remember washing in my helmet because there's nothing there. So you'd heat the hot water, throw it in a helmet, and you wash it, and you wash with it. But of course, when you came back, when they withdrew you from the line, they had rest areas. They had these like 55-gallon drums, and they had a metal tray in it which would hold the water, and that's what they did the wash of the dishes with, etc. And of course, the jungle in New Guinea is malaria-ridden, and when we were in the back area, before you go into the mess hall to eat, your platoon leader, who was a lieutenant, would take Adabrin. Adabrin was a preventive of malaria, and as you went up to the door, you opened your mouth, and he put it right in your mouth, and you swallowed it. And I, for one, I'm glad I took my Adabrin because luckily I never contracted malaria. And malaria is a terrible thing to get.
Now, from that experience, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about other campaigns that took you to the Philippines.
Well, yeah, I was in Morotai. We landed in Morotai Island, and that was they couldn't get the ships ashore because of the configuration, I guess, of the land. So a couple of sailors would have to go in. They tie the cable around the coconut trees, and then you hold on to the rope and you walk in with your rifle over your head. And it was a little awkward because a friend of mine, Don Metris, he was only, I think Donald was what, maybe 5'4", if he was that. I had to hold him up by his scruff of his neck. I was over 6 feet. So I held him up over the scruff of the neck, and he held the rifle. So, and we walked in. And the only bad experience I had there in Morotai, we were in camp. We were able to set tents up, and we had cots. And one morning, it had to be somewhere between 2 or 3. I don't know why to this day, and I don't think I ever will. I opened my eyes, and I could see this green and white lights coming at me. And of course, instinctively, I rolled off the cot right underneath into the ground, got as flat as I could. And what it was a Jap coming in, machine gunning the area. And their incendiary bullets were white and green. That's what I seen. But then I heard them when I woke up, of course. But that was the only bad experience I had there. It was frightening, I'll tell you that. And you're looking up and you see these white and green things coming at you. And then from there, we went into Leyte. I think,
which is in the Philippines.
the Philippine Islands. We went into Leyte. I think we went in D+4. I'm not sure. I think we went in D+4, which means it's the 4th day after the initial landing. And we ended up in Tacloban. And the only thing that was nice there, mail caught up with us in Tacloban. And my cousin in New York, Libby, her name was Lydia Blumenthal, she kept in touch with everybody by mail, and she had sent me a letter, a V-mail. You remember the V-mail? my cousin Ralph, who I used to visit on Sunday prior to the war and leaving the Bronx, every Sunday her brother and I would go visit Ralph, and we'd listen to classical music and read the Sunday paper. We did that from 1936 on until we separated. Well, anyway, she sent me his address, and he was stationed in Tacloban. He belonged to a malarial survey unit. Well, where we were stationed up there in Leyte, it was still not secure. But when I got the letter, we had to send trucks into Tacloban for supplies, and you had to have a shotgun, you know, an armed guard. And I went up to my lieutenant, and I asked him if I can go in because I had a cousin in Tacloban. And he said, sure. So you go in either in the morning or at night. That's when the tide was out. There was I think it was the Limon River. Well, anyway, I went in. Now, at this time, I was down to about 129 pounds. I hadn't shaved in a couple of weeks. I was kind of crummy, actually. And I found, and I told the guys when I got in, I'm going to go look my cousin up. I said, I'll see you guys in the morning. And I went in and I found the house that he was in. And I knocked on the door, and lo and behold, he answered it. And he said to me, what can I do for you, soldier? I says, well, I know a fellow named Morton Miller, and his cousin Ralph is supposed to be in this unit. He says, well, I'm Ralph Miller. I says, really? I stood and talked to him for 30 minutes, and he didn't even recognize me. Finally, I had to say, Ralph, for God's sake, it's me. You know, it's Mort. And he looked at me, and he took me in, and I had my first bath in about a month. They gave me a brand new uniform. I slept on a cot for a change instead of the ground. It was a nice experience. It was in fact, many years later, when my other cousin got married, we went to the wedding. My wife and I were invited to the wedding, and I introduced my wife to Ralph, and Ralph turns to his wife and he says, hey, Helen, this is the guy I was telling you about in the Philippines. So that was a good experience to meet him. And then we went to Luzon, and we were getting ready to go on the Villa Verde Trail, and I came down with infectious hepatitis, a very severe case. I had passed out, and they took me to the aid station, and the doctor said to me, I want you to urinate in this jar, which I did. He held it up, and it was the color of tea. And he says, well, you're going to the hospital. I said, no. He said, yes. So they shipped me to the hospital. That's when I found out I had this yellow jaundice. I turned like that paper. The eyeballs turned like yellow as a high-boiled egg. And then they transferred me from E Company to Service Company in the same regiment. And I went from there, and from Service Company, of course. I had the points to go home, and I went into a replacement camp. And the day they dropped the bomb in Hiroshima, we were in a replacement camp, and we were playing pinochle. And it was, we were very happy about it. We were glad they did, because I'd rather see the Japs lose than us. And they had already told us they were anticipating landing in Japan, and they were looking at 1 million casualties. As far as I'm concerned, I can't see them, us, having 1 million casualties. Let's get them first. It was a horrible thing to drop the bomb, but I agree with it. It saved us untold casualties. And as far as I was concerned, Truman did the right thing, and I always agreed with it.
You mentioned earlier that you were in an unusual situation. You had been released from a hospital. You wanted to get back to your unit, and there was air transportation.
Oh, well, I was hospitalized with my leg, which I burned.
How did that happen, your leg getting burned?
We were back, and we came back to a rest area, and the stove, our stove, which is a 55-gallon drum with a pan of water on it, and a fire underneath, exploded, and it burned my leg from my ankle about 2 inches above my knee. when I got discharged from the hospital, they give you a piece of paper and it says, rejoin your unit the best way you can. There was an airstrip, this is in Ley, New Guinea, and there was an airstrip there called Nadzap Airstrip, and I went down there to see if I could bum a ride up to Sador, was the last place that I knew my unit was. So this sergeant said to me, you'll have to ask the lieutenant. So I went over to see the lieutenant and I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, he said, we're ferrying up 2,100 pounds of fresh eggs. He said, but you'd have to lay in the tail gunner's position. This is a B-25 bomber, which was the twin tails, and it had a big plastic opening for 50 caliber machine guns for the tail gunner. But the opening was wide open, there was no bubble there, it was just an open hole. And so I said, well, you know, that's the way it is, that's the way it is. So I did. When we got to Sador, the pilot, who was a fighter pilot, when they come into an airstrip, they turned vertical and went straight up. And as he went straight up, I started to slide straight out. And I threw out my elbows and my knees, and I caught something which kept me from sliding out that hole and down below. And when he landed, he was at the foot of the stairwell, and I came out, and he looked at me and he goes, Jesus, he said, I forgot all about you back there. I says, thanks, Louie. But that was a hell of an experience, but that was my experience.
He didn't lose any of the eggs then. I imagine they were
Nope,
a welcome treat.
No, they had it battened down, the eggs. They saved all the eggs.
Everybody was looking forward to the fresh eggs out there, instead of the old powdered eggs.
Right. And how? Well, the powdered eggs really, you know, it isn't bad. You know, when you get in positions like that, you can't be picky. That's a good word. I don't know if that's the word or not. You know, you do the best you can what you got. Or as I always say, you do the best you can under the adverse conditions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about opportunities for church services? Do they have that often? Were they well attended?
Yes, they had the chaplains there, and I have to tell you this. I've seen the chaplains of the various faiths hold services of other faiths. Like ministers would hold Catholic, well, not actually Catholic services, but they would fill in, or the Jewish chaplain would fill in, so on. It was, and that was a nice experience I had there. I was in a replacement camp waiting to come home, and I happened to be Jewish. And the rabbi, I went to the service on a Friday night, and the rabbi had said, anybody here from Schenectady, New York? And I jumped up and I said, yes, I am. I was excited. He says, well, I got a guy up here that's also from Schenectady. He'd like to meet somebody. So I went up there, and it happened to be Simon Bernstein. His parents owned the campus shop down on State Street under the underpass. Mm-hmm. His mother owned the Barton gift shop. And his father owned the Snappy Men's shop, is what it was. And of course I didn't believe him, because in the Army everybody, let's say, embellishes something. Yeah. But anyway, Cy and I became good friends, and I said to him, do you come to the services on Friday night? And he says, well, I like to. He says, but I got no way of doing it. Well, at this time, in a replacement camp, I was driving a tractor trailer to keep busy rather than lay around. So I said, I'll pick you up on Friday night. So on Friday nights, I used to go get him with a 20-ton flatbed tractor trailer, take him to the services. It was, and then, of course, he said, you know, if you get home before me, see my parents. And I did, which I did. I got home before him. But that was and Cy and I became very good friends. In fact, through him, I became a member of the Disabled American Veterans. I joined the chapter in Schenectady.
Now, when you were in the service, you mentioned you met a famous person.
Oh yeah, I met Gary Coop in Guinea, and even though I wear a size 13 glove, I lost my hand in his, and he was just the same off screen as he was on screen. Very nice, a real nice, big tall guy. He was he had to be at least 6'6".
Was he in the service at
No, not that I know
He was
of.
traveling
No,
with the
he was,
USO?
He was USO is what he did. He traveled around, and he was USO as far as I know.
Did he have a show, other entertainers with him, or was he alone?
He was alone the time I seen him. He was alone. He was all by himself that time. It was in New Guinea. I don't remember exactly where in New Guinea it was I seen him. It might have been in New Guinea. I'm not sure, but I remember meeting him, and I remember losing my hand in his when I shook hands with him. You know, I got big hands, and he was nice. He was a very nice man.
You mentioned earlier that the mail call usually caught up to you someplace or other. And if you wrote letters home, did they censor your mail?
Some of it was censored. A funny experience was I worked at the Army Depot prior to going into service, and of course I was on a withholding, you know, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a pension plan, they withhold money. I can't think of the word. And I was in the plan because I was a permanent employee of the Schenectady General Army Depot. But one day the mail called up to us, and they handed me mail, and I opened up one, and there was a check for $400. That was in my retirement account, and I started to get hysterical about it. So Metris, my buddy, says to me, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Look at this, Donald. I just got a check for $400. Where are we going to cash it?" And it was my retirement that they sent me when I went in the military. So here I am with a $400 check. Where are you going to spend it in the jungle? I thought it was hysterical anyway.
I assume they did not have formal paydays in the service.
Not as such, no. I can remember when I was in the hospital with the infectious hepatitis, this guy came into the ward. His name was Jimmy Angeram. You know, you're stirring up a lot of stuff in my head. And his name was Jimmy Angerami, and he was one of the administrators of the hospital there in New Guinea. And he said, he hollered out, "Who's this guy from Schenectady, New York in here?" And I said, "Well, me, you know." And he came over and he said, "My name is Jim Angerami," and so on and so forth. He said, "Anything I could do for you?" I said, "Yeah, I don't have any money. I'd like to get some money." No problem. He had a partial pay in 20 minutes. And of course, even if you had money, where are you going to spend it?
Yeah.
There was no place. But of course, being in the hospital, they had a store. So I drew some of the money. I had a partial pay at the time. And it's only because of Jimmy. Otherwise, I wouldn't even known that.
We've heard stories at times that when men had downtime, there were card games and, of course, the old crap game.
Always.
Well,
crap games and card games all the time.
They have a lot of the fellows take part in those things?
Well, usually there was well, I don't know whether you could say there was a core, a bunch of them that always played. I was never one much for the card games. But they always had a card game or a crap game going. The minute you get out of the area, you know, it's right away, bing, they did it. But
what about inspections, military inspections? Where did the big brass ever come and inspect the company or give pep talks?
The one time about the inspection is when we were in Australia, when I was in Australia, and we were at Ascot, the racetrack, Mrs. Roosevelt was supposed to come. So we had to fall out in formation. Now this is July. It was July of 1943. Now you know how hot it is here in July, but over there it's winter. But we felt awkward because here we are, like July 5th to 6th, fall out with a Class A uniform, which is all wool. But unfortunately, two things happened. She didn't show, and it rained like hell. And you know what happens with wool when it gets wet. So we weren't too happy about that. But other than that, there was a lot of pep talks, yes. Prior to going into Guinea, they talked to us about the natives, their customs, and so on. The same thing happened Morotai Island before we went in there, which was Dutch, if I remember right. Morotai was under Dutch rule, and they would tell us about the people, and their money was guilders, if I remember right. And that's what they paid us there. But you really didn't have much use for money anyway, really, because everything you got was, see, when you went into what they call a red line, like a combat zone, I don't know where they drew the line, but I remember when you went into a red line zone, you got everything you needed. There was nothing you could possibly need or want that you didn't get. In fact, the Red Cross had refused a couple of guys, I think it was toothpaste or toothbrushes, because we were in a red line zone, and the Red Cross said, if you're in red line, we don't give you anything. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Now, you received several medals and commendations.
Tell us about the Bronze Star
yeah.
and the unit citation.
No, the Bronze Star was, this is going way back, that if you got the CIB, they gave you a Bronze Star.
Well, CIB is the Combat
Yeah,
Infantry badge.
if you get the Combat Infantry badge, they give you a Bronze Star because of that. And that's all I remember. And now I'm trying to visualize I have the certificate, and it says for, I can't, I'd have to look at it. But I didn't do anything anybody else didn't do. I was just a plain old rifleman in a rifle company.
So then, when you were to leave the service, where did you come back to?
I came back to Schenectady. I was working at the Army Depot. I was a lift operator when I went in. And amazingly, when I came back, see, we had 90 days to get our old job back. And that was the law. And this Johnny Bolts, this friend I mentioned earlier, lived in the Bronx, and I went up to see him, and I was there. And finally, I got back to Schenectady on the 89th day. And I went up to the Army Depot, and I met Major, what was his name? Oh, he was a first lieutenant when I left, but he was there all through the war, and he remembered me, and first thing he said, well, you're getting 20 cents an hour raise. Oh, I said, that's wonderful. So when I went back to get my old, to reclaim my job, which I did, I went from 65 cents an hour to 85 cents an hour, if you can picture that. And I got my job back. And
did they reinstate your pension?
yes, but I didn't have to pay him back. That I paid back when I got ready to retire from the post office. Then I wrote the Civil Service Commission, and they.
Well, now you were at the Army Depot. Then you said you worked for the post office. Did you?
I went from the Army Depot. I went to the Makwa Company, which was a subsidiary of the General Electric Company, and from there I went into the post office, and I enjoyed my stay in the post office. I was very happy with it.
Now, have you, by chance, belonged to any of the military groups like the American Legion or VFW?
Yes, I belong to the Lieutenant Violet O. Fryer, Chapter 88, Disabled American Veterans, of which I am the adjutant of that. I belong to the VFW, Post 357. And I'm also a Boy Scout. And I've been in scouting for since I became a Boy Scout back in 1934. Right now I'm serving the Twin Rivers Council as a unit commissioner in the Scouts. And I'll tell you this, it's a wonderful thing to see these boys come in as a Cub Scout and then advance into scouting, and especially the ones that proceed on to Eagle rank, which is the highest, of course. So I'm still involved with that, yes.
You mentioned the dropping of the atomic bomb. Now, there are probably two other memorable instances. Was there much to do about when it was announced that the war was over in Europe? as well, and then later on in the Pacific?
Well, we knew when the war was over. It was over, what, in May, I believe, in Europe. And as I say, we didn't hear much, but we did hear that a lot of the units in Europe were being transferred into the Pacific. And it was just general. And then, of course, as I said, then we found out the day they dropped the bomb, which the group that I was with, we were very happy about it, because as I said earlier, they were looking at 1 million casualties if we had to make an invasion. So we were all for it, and I still feel today we did the right thing to save our boys' lives and our country. This is our country, and they come first.
Were you able to get any news what was going on back in the States then? Did you see, what about the Stars and Stripes? Did you ever have access to
yes,
that?
we had the Stars and Stripes, and when we didn't have it often, but whenever we could grab a copy or an issue, it made the rounds of the units. That was our most informative information that we got, was through the Stars and Stripes.
Well, I want to thank you very much for doing this interview as well as serving our country.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much.